Well, Helen Roy, it's such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you for having me.
So, you're here talking about, I guess, traditional women's roles. This is a big thing that you're discussing here at the National Conservatism Conference, but that's not your background. And I guess I would love to understand how you ended up doing what you're doing. Yeah.
Sure. I actually studied Chinese in undergrad and leveraged that into a career in national security. While I was waiting on my security clearance, I earned my master's degree at the Institute of World Politics, which is a really amazing school in Washington, D.C. that was started by John Linchowski, who worked for Ronald Reagan when the wall fell. and that was when I started to really study not just the topical contemporary issues that had to do with China that I had sort of focused on before, but instead really get into the history of Soviet communism and the history of Mao. And most of my graduate work was actually on Soviet ideology and ultimately, the conclusion that I kind of came to while I was in graduate school was that while China is our primary external threat, all external threats could be managed if our internal threats were managed first. And the primary national security issue that we face in our country is the breakdown of the American family. And it just so happens that in everywhere that Sovietism was powerful, that's where they attacked first was the family. So it all sort of ties together in that way. I know it's not exactly linear, but
Sovietism, you're saying communism basically, right? Or
yeah, Soviet
is it
communism.
distinct?
Yeah,
Soviet communism, okay. And that's somehow distinctive?
it has its differences from Maoist communism, but obviously it shares certain tendencies. So I sort of use these terms interchangeably.
Okay. So why is there this attack on the family by communists?
Well, I think that is the best way to psychologically break someone is to hit them where it hurts. And uh, when you have children, you start to see just how crucial the mother and the father are to the way that they understand the world and the way that they emotionally self-regulate. I mean, my daughter will look at like leaves on the ground, and she'll see a big leaf and a medium leaf and a little leaf, and she'll say, "Mama leaf," or "Dada leaf, Mama leaf, baby leaf," and it's like this is a natural order, and this is the order that keeps people sane. So you make people weak by destroying that. You make them malleable by destroying that.
If you're a communist ideologue and you're looking to implement this particular ideology on the entirety of society, you need people to be malleable. That's actually kind of a virtue.
Exactly.
Right? Briefly outline to me what the state of the American family is right now.
We've got most of our children are growing up in unstable environments. Most of American children have a disadvantaged conception of the family, and all the statistics that follow that also bear out that this is really damaging to children. They're children of divorce or of broken families are more likely to have mental health issues. They're more likely not to graduate high school. They're more likely to go to jail. But for the people who are having children, our culture does not support like conviviality in the family. I would say our culture doesn't support mothers being home with their children. Most mothers are back to work within 2 weeks of giving birth in this country. And that means most American children are in daycare. It's not that parents have to be 100% one-to-one with their kids all the time, eye to eye, right? I mean, it's natural to have help and to have extended family, and many people don't have that to help with children. But But this sort of industrial scale daycare operation in this country where little tiny babies are just sort of being watched by strangers more often than they're with their parents, I think that that has some downstream negative psychological consequences as well. And, the first generation for whom that was really true is rising up through college now, and we see, frankly, mass emotional incontinence in American universities. So there are a lot of issues to talk about. I could go on, but those are just a few.
I'll just flip this on its head a little bit. As far as I understand it, and this statistic holds true for a long time across left and right wing, think tanks and studies, the single best predictor of success in life is coming from a two-parent household. Isn't that is that still the case?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. We don't in our popular culture there are very few examples of happy marriages, of competent fathers, on television shows and whatnot. These are important images that help people structure their lives in ways that are conducive to happiness ultimately. And we're not doing that, and so but that's my goal is to sort of illustrate the way that I would have, as a younger woman, would have needed to see.
What do you think about toxic masculinity?
Toxic masculinity. Oh, golly. I think the term is used to weaken men, basically. Yes, men can be toxic, women can be toxic, everyone can be toxic, right? But that's a particular kind of, it's like active measures. It's just a term that's being used to demoralize men.
It's like masculinity has
Yes.
been labeled a particular way.
Exactly.
Masculinity becomes the problem, not
Right.
because it has this pejorative moniker
Yes.
attached to it.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, so what do you hope to get out of this conference?
I don't really have original thoughts here. I just feel like God created human beings in a certain way, and that we need to be reminded of what that looks like. And so I think a lot of people are actually doing this implicitly, even if it's not like an explicit sort of religious message. We're being reminded of what it means to be human, and that it's a good place to start.
Well, Helen Roy, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.